Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have enjoyed your quick lunch with the lunch boxes. And really, I would like to really welcome you from FAO side to this side event. And this is about development of forest and landscape restoration strategies at different scales to achieve the restoration commitments that countries have made and really move to scale up the action on the ground. And I'm really happy to see so many of you who come actually from the countries and work on the ground, because you are really the instrumental persons and your colleagues that really can make this happen. We can talk here, politicians can talk everywhere, but you are there to help the countries and your own local communities or regions, countries to really make the difference. So we will be here hearing you actually sharing some experiences from your own countries and regions, and both how to develop and implement the forest and landscape restoration strategies, both at the national and local level. So, as you know all, land degradation is affecting more than 3 billion people around the world. And it's also affecting 30% of arable land globally. So in response, in 2011, the government of Germany and IUCN established or mobilized action to establish and launch the Bond Challenge to really mobilize regions to restore 150 million hectares of degraded and deforested lands. Well, already in 2017, this target was met. And currently, we are actually having more than 70 pledgers from more than 60 countries that are targeting in total 210 million hectares for restorative interventions. So forest and landscape restoration has shown to provide different contributions to most of the sustainable development goals, and also contributions to all the Rio Convention on climate change, on desertification and biological diversity. So they are important there. If any of you have followed recently the CPD, the Convention on Biological Diversity negotiations for the post-2020 global framework for biodiversity, restoration is one of the perhaps most debated target, but we are very happy to see that there is very likely, big likelihood that there actually will be a target. And the discussions that we are having here during this Congress and other places will certainly contribute also to the CPD target setting. So, but as I said in the beginning, that yes, there are these commitments, but what is really still lacking is the action on the ground. So FAO, and in partnership with many other organizations, we are trying to support you and other countries to help develop the forest and landscape restoration strategies. And here's just a few examples, just in a nutshell, just examples what we are doing. For example, the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism of FAO has supported, for example, Vanuatu to revise their forest and landscape restoration strategy. The mechanism has also supported Pakistan and Democratic Republic of Congo under the Global Environment Facility funded the Restoration Initiative program to assist developing localized strategies. And we have been supporting Kenya to develop National Forest and Landscape Restoration Implementation Action Plan. And also I'd like to note that Malawi was one of the first countries in Africa in 2017 to develop a national forest and landscape restoration strategy. And it's currently receiving support from Germany to implement large-scale forest restoration on the ground, forest and landscape restoration on the ground. So I will be stopping here, but I really would like to hear what is the outcome of this debate and your sharing experiences. I personally have a great passion for forest and landscape restoration. So I would hope that Benjamin and Christoph will share with me what is the outcome of this particular dialogue. I unfortunately cannot stay here personally very long, as I have another commitment, but please do share the outcomes, because I said I really like to see progress. I want to hear what's new, what's innovative, what are the new approaches, what has been working and what has not been working. So your experience in this sense is very and extremely important. I will pass now over to Benjamin to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Altina, and rest assured we will definitely keep you posted with all the outcomes and discussion points. So, dear participants, welcome to this exciting session to learn from the ground of what's happening on development of and implementation of forest and landscape restoration strategies. Okay, sorry. Pour les participants francophones et il y a l'interprétation, tu peux prendre le micro si vous voulez. So let's first start. Our first part of this session will be presentations from countries to share their experiences, their barriers, their results. And first we will hear from Mr. Godfrey Bohm, who is the acting director of the forestry department of Vanuatu's Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Forestry, Fisheries and Biosecurity. Unfortunately, he could not make it in person to this World Forestry Congress, but he shared with us a video message. So I will now start this message for you. Giorgio, can you start the video?
Yeah, I'm starting it.
Okay, so this is Godfrey from Vanuatu. I'm currently the acting director of the Department of Forestry under the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Forestry, Fisheries and Biosecurity. So I'm going to do a presentation on the current Vanuatu forest and landscape restoration strategy that was developed with the anticipation of a 10 years period from 2020 to 2030. And this strategy is more an integrated land use approach of engaging different sectors. Not only I focus on forestry or on tree planting, but rather looking at the holistic approach of integrating sustainable land management practices in Vanuatu. Next slide, please. So for the benefit of those who do not know much about Vanuatu, I have the liberty to put this map on the presentation to indicate where Vanuatu is in the Pacific, or where Vanuatu is in the world map. So this is just the map of Vanuatu with 6 different provinces and some of the major islands that we carried out the consultation in developing the forest and landscape restoration strategy. Next slide, please. So for the background of the strategy, the forest and landscape restoration strategy has a 10 years time frame. It was developed and completed in 2020, and we anticipate to implement the strategy onward to 2030. And it aims to guide the government of Vanuatu to be able to commit itself over this 10 years period to provide financial support, to provide technical support, policy support towards this strategy, and also to indicate its commitment, because a restoration mechanism is now becoming a global agenda that most countries, most agencies, most funding agencies also are looking into landscape restoration as one of the priority agenda. So by way of having this strategy, it is a commitment for Vanuatu and also the Department of Forestry to be able to commit itself towards its restoration efforts. So the objectives of the forest and landscape restoration strategy, we have 4 priority objectives, and that is to see deforested areas being rehabilitated and reforested, and not just deforested areas, but the whole landscape, the different landscape that are more or less affected or degraded. We want to see these landscapes restored. And the second one being to engage a wider stakeholder, to be able to influence a wider stakeholder to commit it, not just the national government, but at the provincial levels, at the island level, even down to community level, and most especially the forest-dependent communities to be able to contribute, to be able to play their parts into forest management or restoration efforts. And the third one is to see forest production to be sufficient, or to be able to, or forest to be able to continue and to fight services to the forest-dependent community or Vanuatu as a whole, and also to be able to benefit economically, socially, and environmentally, be able to enjoy the benefits from the forest, and to see surplus in terms of forest products, timber products to be exported, but also maximizing, also sustainably balancing the efforts of production and restoration efforts. And the fourth one is that we want to see with the restoration efforts, not only restoring areas, but also see the contribution of the sector towards income generation, towards revenue generation, and that preaching or talking about the restoration efforts, but it will be convincing to the community, convincing to the stakeholders to be able to see the benefits into their contribution towards the implementation of the strategy. Next slide, please. So the importance of the strategy, Vanuatu, like most of or many countries that depends on their forest resources, we accept or we appreciate that the forest, acknowledge that forest holds the balance of power to maintain positive function of the ecosystems, and that through sustainable forest management, restoration efforts, sustainable utilization of forest resources, and conservation are the importance or the areas of importance that people need to see and to know to be able to contribute to the restoration efforts. So the strategy also aims to support all sectors and also different communities in Vanuatu, including vulnerable groups. We want to see a wider engagement or in the strategy itself. We have a long list of implementers of the strategy, those that we think that they can contribute or they can involve in implementing the strategy. So we have a long list of different communities, different groups that have their own responsibility or task to play. So we do believe that the success of the strategy will have a positive socio-economic and environmental impact for Vanuatu, and this is through a strengthened enabling environment for the whole FLR approach. And we want to see degraded landscape and forest restored. And then with the efforts of the restoration activities, we also want to see the increase of protected areas, forest conservation areas. Within these different landscapes, there'll be different interventions of restoration in these landscapes. And also with the restoration efforts, we want to improve the standard of living of these rural communities and to be able to see or to enjoy the benefits of FLR. And also to secure assistance, to secure human and financial resources to be able to support Vanuatu to implement this the strategy. And also with this the strategy and being or to implement the strategy, we want to learn and measure what has been done, what are the success stories and what not, to be able to tell us that after 10 years what needs to be done to be or to revise or to harmonize or to improve the current strategy. Next slide, please. So during the process of developing of the strategy, in 2000 we started these efforts from 2016. In 2016, we launched a decade on reforestation. That's a national effort. And after 2016, we see the need of developing a strategy to guide the national reforestation program in Vanuatu. That's where we start to work on. And from 2016 to 2018, we carried out a nationwide stakeholder consultation. We prioritized 5 major islands to be the targeted areas to consult in order to develop the strategy. So by 2019, or in 2019, we managed to have a draft strategy in place. And at the time, we shared the strategy with FAO, of which they have shown great interest and have agreed to assist Vanuatu to further improve the forest and landscape restoration strategy of Vanuatu. So in 2019, we present the first draft, of which the result of all the consultations were incorporated into the first draft. And at that time, FAO had stepped forward to support into improving or revising the strategy. So during the process, the course of 2019 to 2020, the revision takes place with the support and technical assistance and finance from FAO. We revise and then we finalize the forest and landscape restoration strategy. So the reason to do the revision was that we realized that the first draft is more or less focused on tree planting instead of looking at the whole landscape approach. So the advice or the inputs that FAO has supported us was along that line, that we need to improve the strategy in order to put more focus on landscape approach, or more so an integrated approach, to be able to include other sectors to contribute to this strategy. So then we had this validation, we validated, and then government has provided its approval of the strategy. Next slide, please. So I guess that's the end of the presentation. And by way of conclusion, again, this revised strategy includes a shared vision of the holistic approach of integrated land management, having to integrate different sectors to be able to play the parts, to be able to contribute to the restoration efforts in Vanuatu, not just on tree planting, but also also on a sustainable land management approach, and to be able to realize the impact or the affected landscape, and to be able to contribute into implementing the strategy. And at the end of the day, we want to see different landscape or degraded landscape restored, and it's not just a national commitment, but also to contribute to the global efforts of forest and landscape restoration. So through the development of the multi-stakeholder integrated land use plans, being at the focus of the FLR Vanuatu is making sure that the land or the forest landscape or the different landscape are managed in a more sustainable manner, and to be able to contribute towards community livelihood and income generation, and also to ensure a resilient future, as it currently is, that the different land uses are not competing, but working together or towards a long-term vision for Vanuatu. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boom, for this recorded message. If afterwards there's questions on this process, we have Christophe Bezazier here from FAO. We can respond to questions during the panel discussion. Now it's the pleasure to welcome Ms. Rosa Combo who is Principal Conservator of the Forest at the Kenya Forest Service, to share with us their experience in Kenya on developing a national forest landscape restoration action implementation plan. So, Ms. Rose, welcome you to the floor. Georgia, you can start the presentation.
Yeah, sharing.
So good afternoon, distinguished guests and colleagues who are joining us today in this side event. As I've been introduced by Benjamin, I'm Rosa Combo. I work for Kenya Forest Service in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry in Kenya. Kenya Forest Service, it's a state corporation in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry that has a mandate to manage, conserve, protect, and manage public forest, while also providing technical advice and support for the 47 counties government in Kenya to manage community and private forests for equitable benefit sharing for the current generation and future generation. As I've been mentioned, I coordinate a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder technical working group that has been developing the Forest and Landscape Restoration Implementation Plan 2022-2026 for Kenya on behalf of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. I have the privilege to share with you the Kenyan experience in developing the Forest and Landscape Restoration Implementation Action Plan. As an introduction, next slide, please. This is the outline of my presentation. I have a brief introduction of how we have progressed with the process of developing the Forest and Landscape Restoration Implementation Action Plan for Kenya, the objective of the Forest and Landscape Restoration Plan, the coordination framework at the national and subnational level that is basically anchored to the existing institutional structures in Kenya, the experience in developing this plan, and of course, finally, to appreciate the ministries, department, agencies, and the partners that have been very, very useful in supporting the development of the plan, but also have expressed interest in supporting the implementation and monitoring progress of the plan towards the achievement of our commitments. Next, please. In terms of the introduction, Kenya is one of among the African countries that committed to the Bond Challenge and the AFRI-100 initiative back in 2016. Kenya committed to restore 5.1 million hectares of degraded landscapes by 2030. And after our commitment, the countries have come up with a number of initiatives to ensure that we are able to achieve these commitments and many other international obligations that Kenya has ratified, including the climate change commitment through the Paris Agreement and our updated national NDC, of course, the CBD commitments, and now the land degradation commitments. So the Forest and Landscape Restoration Implementation Action Plan is a 5 years ambitious plan to accelerate actions to restore degraded landscape in Kenya. It aims to restore half of the commitment by 2026. And this we aim to do through a number of FLR approaches and best practices, which are already existing in the country and in the neighboring countries in Africa. Next, please. So the objective of the Forest and Landscape Restoration Implementation Plan, the first objective, basically these objectives were informed by our situational analysis on our national circumstances and how do we intend to achieve the commitment of 5.1 million hectares. So the first objective is to strengthen policy implementation, institutional coordination, and governance, and also inclusive partnership towards implementation of FLR activities in Kenya. The second objective is to restore the 2.55 million hectares of degraded landscapes, but also to promote green value chains to improve community livelihood and also livelihood of the vulnerable groups in the community, especially the youth and the women. The third objective is to strengthen research, innovative technologies, and capacity development, as well as integrated monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning framework. And finally, the fourth objective is we all know that without resources, we might not be able to achieve our commitments. So our last objective is basically to mobilize resources. Mobilize resources to support implementation of the targets and the other objectives that we have committed to. We're expecting to mobilize resources from our domestic financing sources, but also from the private sector, from our development partners, and also from the citizens themselves. Next, please. So in terms of the coordination framework for this forest landscape restoration implementation, it is anchored in the existing governance structure that we have at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, which basically at the top, we are going to have the National FLR Advisory Committee that will be chaired by the Cabinet Secretary responsible for environment and forestry. But also because of the devolved governance structures we have, this particular committee will also be co-chaired by the chair of environment, in the Council of Governors. So basically, the coordination structure is informed by what is existing currently, even in the next level where we are talking of the National FLR Steering Committee. We already have the we have a number of initiatives that are going on in the country, and the steering committees are normally chaired by the Principal Secretary in charge of environment and forestry. But we have given provision for co-chairing from the Council of Government that is representing the the county governments. When you're coming to the technical level, we have the National FLR Technical Working Group, committee that is already existing and was involved in the development of this forest landscape implementation action plan. But at the county level, we'll be using the County Environment Committee, that is a committee of a composition of the Environmental Management and Coordination Act, their responsibility will be coordination, implementation of FLR activities at county level. And down at the grassroots level, we'll have the Sub-County Environment Committee coordinating this process. Kenya Forest Service will be providing the secretarial role in the coordination of this process. We'll be linking up with the county governments, but also the national government for successful implementation and reporting of the progress. Next slide, please. So in terms of our experiences in developing the National FLR Plan, again, it is informed by the guiding principles of FLR implementing forest and landscape restoration efforts. It's also informed by the work that was started back in 2014, which informed the commitment of 5.1 million hectares as a country. Our experience in Kenya is that this process has been consultative and has involved wider stakeholders' engagement, both at the national and at the county level. And while this is a very critical process in terms of planning and implementation of landscape restoration, it is very expensive and time consuming. And that is one of the reasons why our process have delayed a little bit from 2019 to up to now. At the moment, we have just completed the 7-county engagement consultation, where we engage all the 47 counties into the development of this and giving feedback into the proposed draft plan. In terms of how we were able to, what informed this plan, we had a situational analysis, both at the national and county. We had a situational analysis looking at the status at national and county level to be able to inform the land use challenges, the drivers to deforestation and land degradation, and also the barriers to restoration. At this particular point, we also looked at the opportunities that are existing within different sectors towards implementation of landscape restoration efforts. Of course, it's very important that we focus on all the landscape in the country. When we did our restoration opportunity assessment study, we mapped the potential for restoration in the entire country, including all the major landscape. We had the forest landscape, the agricultural landscape, the rangelands, which covers the bigger portion of Kenya's landscape, and also the wetlands and riparian areas. And therefore, the intervention that we have proposed is cutting across all the landscapes in the country. As we were identifying the landscape challenges, that is, the land use challenges in the country, we were also able to map out the restoration ecosystem services that we would wish to restore. And again, informed by the diversity of the landscape in the country and a number of restoration efforts that were to be restored. The strategy has considered restoring multiple functions for multiple benefits because it cuts across all the landscape and also informed by different stakeholders' interests. Next, please. So again, informed by the restoration opportunity assessment study, we were able to identify 7 restoration options for the country based on different landscape. And within these restoration opportunities, we were able to explore which are suitable for what kind of landscape. And therefore, we explored different suites of restoration opportunities, also looking at the fact that our objectives were informed by the policy gaps, institutional challenges, and also the resource mobilization, and more strongly on the fact that there are quite a number of restoration initiatives going on in the country, but our monitoring framework that is there is not able to adequately report on this. So as we looked at the restoration options and strategies, we also considered the enabling environment to support restoration efforts in the country. Of course, also, we all know that we cannot achieve these targets without the financial mechanism, sustainable financial mechanism. So again, the team explored existing financial mechanism within the country and how we could innovatively mobilize additional finances to be able to support our restoration agenda. And finally, and more importantly, is that we needed to come up with an integrated monitoring, reporting, and learning framework. We had a national scaling conference back in June 2021, and this informed a number of tools and practices that are already in the country, a number of monitoring frameworks that are existing in the country that this particular process could leverage on. We realized that landscape restoration is beyond the forestry sector, is beyond the environment sector, and we needed to bring in our colleagues from the agricultural sector and the water sector. And therefore, within these particular sectors, there are a number of monitoring frameworks that are already existing. And at the moment, we are looking on how do we ensure that we come up with standard indicators that could help us report our restoration efforts in the country. Next. So finally, it's just to acknowledge that these efforts could not be possible without the support from our own governments, the ministries, department, and agency through their technical support, but also financial support. Then of course, recognize the support from FAO and GF6 project under the Restoration Initiative project that has been actually key in driving this process. We also got support, especially on the county engagement. We got support from UN Environment and Nature Kenya, C4E through the UK Pact project, and WWF and our National Community Forest Alliance Association that also supported. Currently, we are also getting support from IUCN to training the use of barometer, but also supporting data collection and how we could be able to use the restoration barometer for our own monitoring and reporting framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rose, for sharing this really truly multi-partner and participatory approach of pushing forward to achieve the restoration of 2.5 million hectares by in the next 5 years. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Floribert Mombolela, who is our FAO coordinator for the GEF6 funded Restoration Initiative program in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's representing Mr. Benjamin Torambi, the Secretary General, who I believe couldn't make it to the session. Floribert, à vous.
Bonjour, chers collègues. Bonjour tout le monde, mesdames.
So good afternoon, everyone. So greetings to all of you here. I thank you for attending the Congress. So, and also thank you for attending this presentation. Thank you. So the presentation was originally going to be delivered by our minister, Minister Benjamin Torambe of the Environment in Congo, but some urgent matters came upon Minister Torambe. So unfortunately, he couldn't attend personally. So on his behalf, I'd like to deliver this presentation regarding what kind of efforts are being made to preserve and restore the forest in Congo. So my topic is the provincial strategy or the strategy of the provincial government for FLR in Congo. But here I want to put a particular focus on a case in South Kivu region or province in Congo. So in this presentation, you are going to hear about 4 aspects. The first, so why did we need this kind of strategy? So why did Congo need this kind of strategy? And the next point of my presentation is going to be the steps that we took to establish this strategy. And third point is going to be the result or the outcome of the strategy. And the fourth, the path forward with this strategy. Can you please advance the slide? So as I just mentioned, we first asked this question. So why do we need to have a strategy at the local government level, at the provincial government level? It's because in DRC, in Congo, you know, there was a climate congress in New York, and Congo made a commitment to the convention, meaning that we are going to restore 8 million hectares of forest and degraded land by 2030. And also, we made a pledge to make a contribution to the bond and the initiative AFR 100. So we needed to put our efforts on the ground because these initiatives are already established. For example, the Biological Diversity Convention or the UNFCCC, and also the Paris Climate Convention, and also CNU and CD, the UN Convention Against Desertification. So we already made a pledge to these established conventions. And there's another motivation to come up with a provincial strategy, which is to strengthen our institutional capacity and also technical capacity as well, to have a more integrated approach to restoration. And we felt that local efforts are needed for that. So here, my presentation is more focused on the southern part of Congo, South Kivu area. And also we felt the need to have a biodiversity plan at the national level. And also we wanted to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions as well. And also we wanted to make a contribution to address the climate change challenge as well. So there were multiple motivations that led us to realize that we need to build a local strategy as well. And also we felt the need to secure funding for these strategies as well. Then what are the main pillars of this local strategy? So there are 5 main pillars of actions. So based on these 5 pillars, the local strategy was built. So what the first pillar is the governance for the activities for FLR. For example, political framework, institutional framework, and legal framework as well. These needed to be improved in our view. And based on that, we hope to make better decision making. And the second pillar is to have tools and methods for plan building, and we wanted to be consistent about it. So at the local level and also at the land level as well, we wanted to have a consistent tools and methodology. And the next pillar is to kind of broaden our techniques to establish these efforts. And the next pillar is to have a financing mechanism. Financing mechanism for restoration, for forest and landscape. And the pillar 5 is to restore the forest and land in southern Kivu part. So the FLR is basically a process, as a participatory process, because we believe that participatory process is the best to maximize the outcome. And also we want to invite the vulnerable group into this process, for example, local community and Aboriginal people, and also people who are directly participating in restoration efforts, and also small-scale business owners. So these multiple stakeholders, we believe that they need to be actively participating in the building and implementing a restoration plan. And also the action plan for such plan and also analysis are important as well, because we believe that the FLR projects, because the restoration options can be identified best by utilizing objective measures. So if you look at this table, so at the end of a long process, we were able to arrive at this kind of options. So for example, we were able to identify the restoration options. As you can see here, we identified 3 options. Option 1, the most suitable agricultural technology. Second option, community. So the second option is about community, forest and forestation for the community. And the next is restoration and protection. And the next column is about intervention methodology or intervention types. So for which option, what will be suitable intervention types? And then you can see that there are natural regeneration and conservation agriculture and also soil erosion prevention and protection. So multi-stakeholders. So we had a multi-stakeholder analysis, and depending on their choice, some types are included, some are excluded. And then you can see that the 4 types of soil or land, for example, so dense forest and secondary forest, savanna, and also cultured land. So land culture and land regeneration. So you can see that it's kind of mixed. So there could be mixed use for a given land. So for example, in savanna, if you look at the column called savanna, you can see that there are a lot of X marks. So many multiple stakeholders said that multiple types of intervention can be applied for the options. So soil protection is included here, tree planting is included here. And if you look at the secondary forest column, the secondary, so it sees that natural regeneration and also conservation, agriculture conservation. If you look at the plantation for conservation, 2 methods are chosen.
Dans le cadre de la restauration est lié au degré d'exposition.
And also for the restoration and conservation, the efforts can vary depending on the steepness of the land. So for example, if the steepness or the slope of the land, if it's moderate, or if it's strong, or if it's very steep, very strong, then appropriate types of interventions are chosen here, marked here, as you can see. So for example, if the steepness is very strong, if the land is very steep, then you can see that conservation, agriculture, and reforestations are chosen or marked here. And also if the steepness is moderate, for such forest, then you can see the marked types of intervention, for example. So for example, natural restoration, regeneration is not chosen, but reforestation is chosen or marked. And conservation and the soil erosion prevention through planting trees are kind of chosen here. And also if the steepness is very strong, so if the land is very steep, then conservation, tree plant, and tree plant to prevent soil erosion are chosen. So once again, these kind of identifications were possible because multiple stakeholders were actively participating. So that's why we were able to come up with this table. So the table was a kind of a quick overview of what kind of efforts we are making depending on the objective or the priority. So this way, we are doing our best to address the forest and land restoration and also to make contribution to our global effort to deal with climate change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci Floribert pour partager cette unique expérience pour élaborer une stratégie plus adaptée au contexte.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So it was a really accurate picture of the efforts that are being made in Congo. Thank you very much.
To give the floor to Mr. Fezul Bari, who is the FAO National Project Coordinator for also the Restoration Initiative project in Pakistan, to share the experience of the project to develop a forest landscape restoration strategy at the district level.
Picture is fit. Very long. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm Dr. Fezul Bari from FAO Pakistan. I will take you to Asia rather than Africa. We heard a lot about that. In Asia, especially in Pakistan, we have the TRI project, which is managed by FAO, IUCN, and UNEP jointly. And we have a lot of experience from that project. I also work for the government, and we also started the 1 billion tree project, which is very unique in Pakistan, and also now currently the 10 billion tree project, and how the national project, TRI project, contributed to the 1 billion and 10 billion tree project. That is very important. So what I'm talking about will be district level strategy, FLR strategy development. How we started at district level and then how we are proceeding further. Next, please. So the project, yeah. So here, what we can see is that the tool which we used was the Rome exercise. You know, that is the restoration opportunity assessment methodology. It was done with the help of our IUCN, because IUCN has basically the expertise on that. And how we started basically this TRI project, which we call Chalghoza project, which is the reversing deforestation and forest degradation and high conservation value in Pakistan. These forests are very unique globally. These are only the Chalghoza pine, which is Pinus gerardiana, is mainly found in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Very little maybe in other countries. In Pakistan alone, it is 132,000 hectare area. But there are a lot of degradation going on. So when we started the formulation process of the strategy, we conducted the restoration, the Rome exercise in all 4 target districts across Pakistan. So there were like 4 provinces in which this methodology was conducted. And then we focus on one district to go more deep into it. And that district is in Chitral, which is the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Forest Department, Pakistan. It is a unique area, not only by ecology, but also by culture. The special Kalash tribe lives there from centuries, which are very unique, indigenous, you cannot call indigenous, but very unique type of culture they have. So we started from Chitral. And in Chitral, the first thing was we conducted a stakeholder workshop, because forest department is separate and it is more controlling all the forest in the country. Of course, this is a provincial one. And then we have agriculture, and then we have livestock, and then we have rural development. But these people don't talk to each other, and then the same way the community, everybody approached them separately. So this integrated approach was not at all there. So we started with the FLR strategy, where we started consultation at different levels. First, at a district level, we are all the stakeholders from the department and key local leaders were there. Then we shifted to local level community. There were more focus group discussions about the strategy. So the Rome exercise basically told what are the hotspot, what are the opportunity, what are the degraded sites. Of course, this deduction was made by GIS and remote sensing, as well as by discussion with the community. So different spots were identified where restoration was really important. Of course, those areas which were a little bit far, the restoration was not a bigger issue there. The forests were intact. But in the area close to the communities where there was a lot of pressure for fuel wood, for grazing, it was a major problem. So we started the focus group discussion from there. And then all the community, including the forest department and the livestock agriculture, they sit together and they ask, okay, what can be done? This is the existing situation, but if we are using the FLR approach, how we will address this? FLR approach means also in our country more like integrated landscape approach, where you are not only talking about trees, forest, but you are also talking about other nature resources, agriculture, livestock, biodiversities, water, and other things. Next, please. So the process which we adopted, as I said, was the Rome exercise. And then this was also sort of new tool which we used in Pakistan for the first time, the Rome methodology. Of course, it was very nice and efficient tool, which really helped us. Then the community discussion, and as I already said, and then data was collected, both secondary data and also from the focus group discussion, what the local community was thinking about the restoration opportunity, what are the driver of deforestation, how to address those in form of a more organized strategy. Of course, the data which was collected was related to the socioeconomic condition. The people are really poor. There are a lot of dependency on the local resources. So it becomes very difficult when you go to an area where poverty is very high and the people don't have alternative resources for fuel wood, for livelihood. So their whole dependency is on the forest. And in such situation, when you are talking about restoration, it means you have to really bring incentive to the local people. Otherwise, these people will not be in a position to restore the forest. Of course, the benefits goes to the downstream people because of the sustainable water flow, other products, and how they contribute into it is still a big issue. But it is worth doing. Currently, the local people are not doing, but the government are reinvesting in the degraded sites to restore the productivity and function of those. Then the FLR strategy was put there, and then it was not only strategy, it was also because at a district level it was possible to start implementation of this strategy. So the first thing in the strategy was to revive the previous system, which was basically finished over time. So there were local community organization, we call it JERGA. They will decide, which is a means a lot of people from the community from different tribes, they will decide how to use the forest resource, where to put harvesting ban, where to stop grazing, where to regulate grazing. So those first thing was we revived it because it was working very well before, but over the time it was gradually vanished. So we thought it's good that whatever rules regulation they have, we follow that. Next, please. This is just a picture of the stakeholder, and you can see at a district level, there were like more than 100 stakeholders who took active part in discussing the restoration opportunities, discussing the plan, how to go for it, and then also involving the local community and what sub incentive should be given to them. Next, please. This is the Kalash tribe. Christoph also visits that area, maybe his picture is there. And this is a very unique culture. and they are very much interested to conserve their forest. So this is like 3,000 to 5,000 household total. They live in 3 valleys. They have different culture, different religion, everything very ancient. They live in a traditional way, but they are very concerned about nature resources because they say until their resources are intact, they get fuel wood from their fire, non-timber forest product. And this chalgoza nuts is a major income for the local people, which contributes like 20% of their local livelihood. It contributes because 1 kilogram of chalgoza is around $50. And 1 tree can easily produce 6 to 7 kg of this. So it is like crop. They consider it like crop, like their apple tree or orange trees. Previously, there was not much demand for it because the international market was not open. But when international market, especially China, it opened, the prices went very high. And the TRI project really helped organizing the local community and the farm of, we call it Chalgoza Protection and Conservation Committees. Total are 15 communities across the country. Within this valley, these valleys, Chitral, we have 3 valleys, 3 communities, and they are actually in charge of how to manage the forest, how to provide support to the other stakeholders to come in, like the private sector, because this project on one hand is providing to conserve the forest, to restore the forest through assisted nature regeneration by involving the local community through grazing exclusion. And the other thing is value chain development. As I said, like 7 billion rupees each year is currently taken out of from whole of the country. So it's big money and it can be brought more in sustainable way. Next, please. This was the result when different areas were identified which would require restoration. Next, please. And then when the strategy was used, we used this FLR strategy for implementation. Chalgoza Forest Protection and Conservation Committee was established, as I already said. Revival of the traditional system, forest protection and conservation and restoration. And then frame rules and regulation. And these rules were regulations were not only put on paper, but actually they were implemented. Anybody who will violate those rules and regulations, they will be penalized and their money will go back for restoration. Next, please. So although the project has only run for 3.5 years, but this is a very fundamental project which has a very direct link with the whole country. As at the start of this project, the 1 billion tree project was started and then 10 billion tree project started. So this concept of FLR was promoted. Before I started this project, I was working for the government, forest department, and I formulated the 1 billion tree project and I implemented it for 1 year. So basically this assisted nature regeneration, the multiple land use, the integrated approach, these were the concept which we really integrate in our country level program. So as a few results, for example, in this district, we have 3 committees. Of course, at country level, we have 15. We have 12 assisted nature regeneration sites in this district, while in country, we have 48 under the Chalgoza JEF project. And we have 480 hectares under assisted nature regeneration, 48 sites. We are providing fruit and forest plant to the local community, mostly local species, in the district 0.3, but as a whole about 1 million plants. And then livelihood opportunities have been explored. Of course, we were a little bit late in that. And the lesson learned, we have to start it very quickly. Now we have to start like honeybee production, medicinal plants, fodder development, and forest and fruit nursery raising. So the project has really put this type, which is more community center, and there are a lot of chances of sustainability of this. Next, please. Maybe this is the last one. So in a nutshell, the start of the strategy was from a district level using the Rome exercise. And then we really went up at province level, which is the province in which this district is located. It is having like more than 50% of natural forest. So it was integrated there, and under 10 billion tree project, this approach is being followed. Of course, it needs now more institutionalization. At a strategy level, it is working, but we have to also institutionalize at a policy level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisal, for this short trip to Asia. Now, for the last presentation, we return back to Africa, and I would like to welcome Ms. Prisa Muntali from FAO Malawi office. We will present the experience on developing and implementing the National Forest Landscape Restoration Strategy for Malawi.
Thank you. Being the last person, I hope I will not bore you with my presentation because it's more or less like kind of familiar, similar to other countries who have presented. As Benjamin said, my name is Priska Muntali from FAO Malawi. I'm here to present on behalf of the Malawi government, Department of Forestry, who are not able to be with us at this Congress. So I will go with you through the process which Malawi went in developing this forest landscape restoration strategy. We'll look at the importance and how the implementation is going in the country. Next slide, please. So my presentation is outlined as follows. I'll give you a brief overview on introduction in case you don't know where Malawi is. And then we'll go through why we needed this strategy and the process itself, which we went through. And again, I'll provide a short overview of the strategy and how the implementation is going and some next steps thereafter. Next slide, please. So as a brief introduction, Malawi is a landlocked country, which is situated in the Southern Africa, with an estimated population of about 18.6 million. And it is one of the poorest country whose economy is heavily dependent on agriculture. It employs about 90% of its population in agriculture, and making it so much vulnerable to external shock and climatic shock. 98% of our land depends on rain-fed agriculture. Hence, farmers are extremely vulnerable to climate change and shifting weather patterns. We also have high erosion rate. We lose about 40,000 tons of soil, which is totally damaging our agricultural productivity and hindering socio-economic growth. Next slide, please. So why did we need this forest landscape restoration strategy? Malawi faces a lot of challenges, biophysical challenges, as well as socioeconomic challenges. And on the slides there, we see some of those biophysical challenges which led into formulation of this strategy. We have decreasing forest cover due to deforestation. We have poor water catchment management due to unsustainable forest management, bushfires, as you can see. And also we have decreasing resilience of rural households due to climate change, and decreasing land productivity and soil fertility due to soil erosion and land degradation. And these are leading to other socioeconomic challenges like food insecurity, poverty, limited incomes, as well as the increased burden on women-led household, especially as they go fetch firewood and other necessities. Next slide, please. So how was the process in Malawi done? We are thankful to IUCN and WRI who went with us through the national assessment. We used the ROM tools and methods to produce our strategy. There were several consultations which were done at different levels, national, district, as well as the rural community level. And we also did a stock taking of what successful restoration interventions we have. And it was done across all the 28 districts in Malawi. Then there was a spatial analysis mapping the degraded lands, degradation, and also we looked from there, come up with the restoration opportunities which could come out of that degradation maps which were produced. Then there was economic and financial analysis to see how cost of restoration and the benefits would come out of the restoration initiative which would undertake after the strategy. But also we identified the baseline so that we could propose some monitoring indicators for the strategy. An analysis on the police institution, whether they support restoration or whether they hinder, was done so that we could see the gaps in terms of the policies and how the institution coordinate. And also we made sure that we had a gender responsive restoration. So several stakeholders consultation were done in order to have the gender responsive restoration. Next slide, please. So how long did this process take us? We started in November 2015 with expressing interest to AFRI-100 initiative for this strategy formulation. And then before we went fully fledged in the at national level, there was a pilot which was done in one of the districts, and it was done between October 2015 and February 2016. After that piloting, then the assessment itself was launched in February 2016. Task force and working groups were formulated to would spearhead the assessment itself. And then various stakeholders consultation and data collection was initiated between June to September 2016. Then thereafter, there was data analysis, which led to production of various products like degradation maps and the restoration opportunity maps. And then in 2017, we had the production of the National Forest Landscape Restoration Strategy for Malawi. There were no major challenges first because all relevant stakeholders from national, district, and the community levels were consulted. Next slide, please. So in 2017, that's when we had our strategy. And as you know, Malawi pledged to restore about 44.5 million hectares by 2030 under the AFRI-100 initiative and bond challenge. So this strategy is a means in which we are going to meet this pledge. And at the moment, it has been started being implemented. So I will give you a short overview of how the strategies is applied. Next slide, please. So we have national goals into which this national forestry landscape restoration strategy respond to. The national goals for the country, these are also reflected in the 2016 vision, is to improve food security up to alleviating poverty. And our strategy, the FLR strategy, contributes to these national goals. So the strategy is not working in isolation. It's part and parcel of the overall national goals of Malawi. So these particular interventions in the strategy are contributing to the national goals of the country. Next slide, please. So these are some of the restoration interventions which we came up with after the consultation was done. They are grouped into 5 categories. We have those that are into agricultural technologies. We are looking at good agricultural practices, providing good seed for communities, farmers to produce much more. And we also have intervention that are grouped within community forest and woodlot. This is to increase the energy sources, because we know Malawi depends on fuel wood or wood energy for energy sources. So community forest and woodlots would increase the energy sources by planting more trees. And the other category is looking at forest management. These are the state forests, whereby we want to improve protection and management of the state forest. The other category is to do with soil and water conservation. We want to arrest soil erosion. So these are interventions that will control soil erosion as well as conserve water under the agricultural land. And last but not least, we have also interventions under river and stream bank restoration, because that's also part of the hotspots problems which we identified during the exercise, the assessment exercise. Next slide, please. So the previous slide was looking at what the interventions which we are going to do and implement under the strategy. So who are to undertake the implementation of this? So we have a whole range of array of those who will be involved, ranging from farmers, rural communities, traditional leaders. We need the traditional authorities to take charge, NGOs, government, private sector, and other partners like donor partners. So I know throughout the session, plenary session, we have heard about calling for more involvement of rural communities, farmers. So in our strategy, we take it that we need to involve all those stakeholders so that we implement the strategy. And how is that strategy going to be implemented? We are looking at governance issues. We would want to reinforce the landscape governance by strengthening local bylaws on management of trees and use. And also we want to build this movement for FLR approaches. We want to expand on communication and outreach so that we share information broadly, so that the youth should know about forest landscape restoration approaches, and so that we take them on board and have this movement going. We're also looking at equitable benefit sharing. We would want to increase socioeconomic benefits accrued to the communities and all those individuals who are investing in the FLR interventions. And also we are looking at policy coordination, making sure that we mainstream integrated landscape management approaches, and we have increased support either through policy coordination and institutional coordination. Next slide, please. So as part of implementation, after the production of the strategy in 2017, the department through its partners are now going into development of the monitoring framework. Since the assessment was done nationwide, would want to monitor each and every intervention which is being implemented, because it's not only the government of Malawi implementing the strategy, we have various stakeholders who are also taking on board on these forest landscape interventions. So there is a monitoring framework which is being developed so that we can capture each and every progress made. Through various projects as well, we are developing restoration plans in several districts. For example, we have a USAID, UK aid funded project, Modern Cooking for Healthy Forests, which is developing restoration plans in the districts where they are implementing their project. We also have a RECA program, IKI, funded by BMU, whereby we are also implementing forest landscape restoration intervention. In the meantime, we also developing a restoration plan. This RECA program is just targeting one of the district in Malawi, and we are intending to implement forest landscape restoration in an area of about 25,000 hectares. So we hope by the end of the project, we will restore about 25,000 hectares of degraded area. We also have an upcoming GF7, Transforming Landscape and Livelihoods, which is also going to make use of this strategy in making sure that we advance the various intervention under FLR. I already mentioned about the FLR intervention under the ARECA project. The FLR has also been included in our nationally determined contribution at country level. So we will be tracking these in the NDC, but also since the strategy was done at national level, the Malawi government is trying to mainstream FLR into the district development plans. So we'll have FLR approaches, interventions mainstreamed within the district development plans because the strategy is at national level. Next slide, please. So as the next step, we are going to strengthen governance of natural resources at community level by making sure that we have local bylaws on use and utilization, and management. And also we'll look into policy and institutional coordination, because there might be gaps and there can be conflicting policies within the various departments in the country. So we want to coordinate FLR among all stakeholders. And as I said, we want to build this movement. So there will be capacity to increase outreach. Would want to train our frontline staff, increase their awareness, and also train them on the FLR approach. And last but not least, we are into resource mobilization so that we have more resources to support FLR intervention in the quest of implementing the strategy which we have developed. Next slide. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. In interest of time, I would like to ask all the panelists to maybe sit here in front. And instead of me asking questions to the panel, I would like maybe to open the floor for the participants to have, if you have one or two questions, and that directed to the different presenters that were with us this morning. So Fezul, Rose, Priska, I think Floribert just started. So we can start with you. If there any questions, please, please ask your question there in the microphone in the middle of the room, and then tell us to who you will ask the question. The floor is open. If you don't know, I can start with my question that I prepared. Yes, you can go to the microphone there, please.
Well, thank you very much for all the presentations. It was really interesting to see the variations and also the context. My name is Melvin Lippe. I'm from the Thünen Institute in Hamburg, Germany. And I would like to know, for the landscape restoration in the field, on the ground, how did you choose the sites? This was a stakeholder process. So this was like local communities select, study restoration sites. So this was done by a geospatial analysis, or did you use participatory mapping? Or did you use like online tools? This would be my interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question? Yes, Meshach.
Yes, thank you.
And please, if you have a question directly to one of them, you can please mention it, or is it just general?
Okay, it is more general, and also I'd like to also thank you all for your presentations that really shows the progress you have made along these years. I don't know how many, but time is really one thing I'm learning here in terms of from the concept until you have implementation. But I have a key question, I think, for all, which is if you think of one or two key elements, let's call it elements, that are more things that are in place through the project that can really sustain FLR processes after the money ends. So what will be that? What will that be? Thank you.
Thank you. So can I give you the floor? Yes, Faisal or?
Yeah, maybe I can answer the second question, and my colleague can then answer the first one. So yes, it works automatically.
Yep.
Okay. So the important thing is that what basically works is you have to really identify the key stakeholder at a community level. In our case, for example, these were more community forests, means managed by the local, owned by the government. The land is owned by the government, but the local people have rights for fuel wood collection, for non-timber forest product collection. And when the forest previously were to be harvested commercially, legally, they would get 80% of the total revenue. So in a way, the land belonged to the government, but the local people have a lot of rights. Now, the point was how to address the local people, how to approach the local people so they have a more stronger view. Because generally, you know, the forest department have more a policing type of working style. They will stop the people, penalize the people, even if there will be no, for example, they have the genuine needs, but the department would say, no, you cannot cut. If you will cut a tree, you will be offender. So by organizing the communities, which we call Chalgoza Forest Conservation and Protection Committee, they are not only protecting the Chalgoza, which is a particular species, but whatever landscape comes in, they will also protect that. So the key thing is that you have to invest in the local community, organize them, empower them, and let their work in implementation and let their work also in monitoring. This is one of the key lessons learned. The second key lesson is there must be something for them by the project for restoration. What their something would be increase their livelihood. So that is also important. Until there is an inbuilt incentive for them, it will be very difficult if you are asking about restoration initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisal. Maybe you can respond to someone to the first question.
Thank you. I will attempt to respond to the two questions because when we're looking at how we choose sites for restoration activities in my country, through the ROM assessment, we were able to map all the degraded landscapes within the countries and their potential for restoration. But this is building up on existing activities that are going on in the country in different ministries. What is going on in the Ministry of Environment through the forestry sector, the Ministry of Agriculture through the climate smart agriculture and sustainable land management, and also the Ministry of Water and Resources, which are also implementing activities around catchment protection and conservation through ensuring that those water catchment areas are restored. So, but basically for this particular process, we did an entire mapping for the entire country and be able to identify areas for restoration, but we also identified restoration opportunities for all these areas in terms of the restoration option. For when we looked at the forestry sector, we were able to come up with relevant FLR approaches in terms of afforestation, reforestation, and also in terms of restoration and rehabilitation. In the agricultural sector, then we are looking at the agroforestry strategies and suitable agricultural agroforestry activities. And then of course in the rangeland, we are looking at rangeland restoration, grass reseeding and all that. Then of course, we did not forget restoration in terms of creating new green spaces within our cities and urban areas. So there are different forms of restoration, but the vision is that once we have the National Forest Landscape Restoration Plan, then we are going to cascade this into the county restoration plans and also the landscape relevant restoration plans informed by the ROM for those particular level. Then in terms of how we intend to sustain this, again, this is going to be anchored in what is existing. We have different ministries, departments, and agencies that are currently implementing restoration efforts in the country. In our ministry alone, we are having the 10% strategy of achieving and maintaining 10% tree cover, and we have a tree growing campaign, 2 billion tree growing campaign to ensure that we are able to achieve the 10% tree cover by the end of this year. And at the moment, we are already at 8.83% tree forest cover and 12.3% tree cover. So basically, if we are going to anchor our effort, our support through existing strategies and including the NDC actions that we are also doing as a country, this will be able to be sustainable. But there's still a huge gap that needs support for funding, for innovative technologies, and also capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you. If Floribert or Priscilla can maybe respond to any of these questions in 1 minute, and then we have to close.
Okay, maybe I can add on to what Rosa said. For Malawi, for example, we are trying to sustain this. We are trying to mainstream the forest landscape restoration interventions into the district plans, so that the various district commission or council can implement these interventions, or they are part and parcel of their normal today activities. And maybe in response to the first question, I have seen the difference between a national level kind of assessment and that for the district level assessment. For Malawi, where we are developing the district, the restoration plans, there was already done an assessment in 2016. And now we are using those results to update on what was done. And we are having like hotspot mapping to determine exactly, because at national level, the scale is a little bit, but when you go to district level, the scale is downscaled and you are able to have interventions close to the ground. So yeah, they are those two different things, national and district. So it's much more easier, and you find more intervention at the district level rather than at national scale.
Thank you. Floribert, vous avez une réaction sur les deux questions? J'ai pas entendu la question. La deuxième, c'est les éléments clés pour soutenir les actions de restauration.
So about the question, so do we have additional questions, or do you have additional question or comment?
Okay. Merci.
So I delivered my presentation on behalf of our minister in Congo. So what will be the key points in terms of supporting the restoration effort? Well, through various discussions, we were able to identify the key elements. So in my view, one of the most critical element is to have the right kind of laws and regulations for the local community situation. So sometimes local law or regulation revisions are necessary. So because the restoration efforts are being done based on the legal ground. So updating the legal framework is important. And to that end, we looked at various laws and regulations at the local level. And through these laws, local people can actually participate in intervention activities. So having the right legal framework suitable for the local situations is important. And second, so we need to identify the right local community that can actually benefit from the restoration efforts, and also to make the communication to that local community. So to help them understand what kind of benefit they can enjoy from restoration or intervention activities. So that kind of awareness campaign or education activities were useful to implement the strategy. And third, securing enough resources is also important. If you look at most of the activities that we are trying to enforce, it takes certain amount of resources. So for example, if you want to restore forests or land, it takes money, it takes resources. So securing these resources is of course important. Then where can you get them? Primarily, the government provides such resources. So the government needs to secure the financial resources and other resources. For example, let's say that for a certain local community to access a certain land, then the government needs to give them the right resources so that people at the local community can actually access the designated land area. And that requires sometimes technology experts and financial resources. And also the government officials also need to work in tandem with the local people. Financial resources are of course important. So in order to undertake intervention activities, you need to mobilize at least a minimum amount of money. And also sometimes you need to invite some experts. That takes money, of course. So for example, you need to invite the expert. The experts needs to come in and travel to the local community to talk with the local community. So that costs you money. So you need to secure the right financial resources for that. So the government's support, the government's mobilizing the resources, human resources as well is important. Can you wrap up, please? Because we need to close the session. So local community participation is important, and mobilizing the right resources is important, of course.
Merci Benjamin, je vais être très bref parce qu'on est un petit peu en retard. Je crois que nos interprètes vont.
Thank you very much. So we kind of ran behind the schedule a bit, so let me be very brief. So we were able to listen to various presentations, and a lot came to my mind. So irrespective of the scale, we need coordination. And various sectors and various actors need to work together. So cooperation is necessary. So as we heard from yesterday's plenary session, a multi-stakeholder dialogue is important. So when we build a plan, when we coordinate a plan, we need a lot of consultation among stakeholders. And what kind of restoration efforts are going to be made at what kind of locality, that is an important decision to make, and who is going to undertake such activities, that's another important decision to make. And here the local community's role is important. By utilizing these tools, we need to identify where the restoration potential is the maximum. But just because such potential is maximum, it doesn't mean that the local community will always participate actively. So in a nutshell, if you want to have the most desirable outcome, you need to ensure the participation of the local community. So we listened to various cases of various countries. We were able to see that we pursue an integrated approach, not just focused on planting trees. So it also means that you can do a lot with this strategy, and you can pursue various outcomes as well that can benefit the local community people financially as well. Because at the end of the day, the local community should be able to enjoy the positive benefits of such efforts. Otherwise, they're not going to participate actively. So we need to think about their economic benefit and also biodiversity, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and other considerations as well. We looked at various examples today, whether it is at the county level, at a district level, at a provincial level, at a national level, we can see that this is the common approach, integrated, inviting multiple stakeholder participation. So thank you all very much for staying with us till the end. Also, big thanks to our interpreters as well. Thank you.
Thank you everyone also online.